So welcome back to my short series on Node and VS Code, sort of first steps. In this one, we're going to do something a little bit more fancy. We're going to try to connect to Postgres database and just pull out some data from a table. So what have I done so far? Is I created a new folder, I made my main.js, and I installed some software. So I used npm to install two of my favorites, prompt sync and PG library. So my main doesn't have any coding yet, and so I'm just going to start off here and start import the code with the require statement. So const is, and we're going to call this input like we've been doing in previous videos, is equal to require. And who I need to require? Prompt sync. There it is. Grab it. This one's special. Got to run that one right away to hook into the command line. I'm also going to bring in the client object. So I use the client object to connect to Postgres. And it's equal to require. And who do I do require? PG dot client. So we should be good to go there. You might see some other syntax out there. I've seen this style. And so it's sort of short form because they're always looking for different ways to not type code. Is equal to require PG. So you might see that syntax out there. It's sort of short form. It means create a variable called client by pulling the client object out of this library in that. So I'm going to do it old school, the one I'm comfortable with. But you might see this other variant out there. The big thing now is I need to prompt the user for their username and their password. So I will go const again, and I will say user is equal to input, enter your username, :space, and I'll copy this. Remember to change the variable name to password. And there's a nice feature on prompt sync that you can send in some extra options wrapped up as JSON. The key is echo, so I want to change the character that gets echoed, and in this case to 2 asterisks. That way when the user types in the password, you won't see it displayed on the screen. You'll see 2 asterisks for every character that they type in. Now I have to set up a connection information object. I'm just going to like bundle all the information together. So I can just pass in one thing. And so I'm going to call it connection info, make it equal to a JSON object. So this is going to be key value pair. The keys are pretty important. We have to stick with the keys that PG is expecting. So they're expecting something called host. You set it to whatever that is. And that here I'm going to go local host, which means my laptop, loopback address, port, defaults 5432, database. Now, if you've connected to Postgres with other clients, sometimes that's called DB name. But in here, they're like, no, we want the key to be called database. And the database I'm going to connect to is called video demo. And then who's the user who is connecting? What user is connecting to that database? Maybe they're not allowed to. And that's going to be the user that the person typed above. And what is the password that user is using to authenticate against the database? And that is the password that they set above. So all I'm doing here is just taking all of this information and wrapping it up as one thing, so I can just pass it off as one thing later on. But host, local host, port 5432, database video demo, user, password. Right. I'm going to set up my SQL statement. So const again, a little SQL, just a little string literal, and a select star from a table called pass that I hope is in my database. We're going to find out if it's not. Then const, I need to make a new client object. Now when I make this, got to say new. That's the standard now from Emacs, and it's going to be that client that I brought in earlier. I need to pass the client when I created the connection information. Now at this moment in time, it's not going to try to connect to the database. It's just kind of going to create a client, pre-populate it with all the info it needs to do to make a connection. And then you have to say, okay, client, now it's time to connect. And so I'll put these two together. So I go client dot connect. So it found it in that. Now connect will return a promise, and so built into a promise is like a try-catch kind of structure, except the try gets remapped into something called then because it's an asynchronous call. And so try to connect. If that works out, then try to query. And it's really important that you pass it a function to query. So this notation is the arrow notation. So the parentheses kind of mean, yeah, I'm a function. By making it on the fly right inside here. And it's just going to be a one line client.query. And then query just wants an SQL statement to run against the database. And I made that earlier. And then if that works out, right? But this starts to get kind of messy, right? So this is all one line because JavaScript is a line termination language. There's a character that says the line has finally stopped. We can actually take this one line and break it over multiple lines just for readability. So client, I want you to connect. Then if that works, I want you to query. And if that query works, then I want you to print the result. And every time it needs an asynchronous function to run. So we'll make that function on the fly. This is me right in between these parentheses, making a function that didn't exist before. It's going to be a one-liner like the one above. Console dot. I'm not even going to use log. I'll use table. I just got to remember to send it an array, right? Now, a big thing is when this part of the promise runs, it's going to return a result if it's successful. It'll either return a result, right, or an error, right? And so I can call it whatever I want. Remember, this is like going function some parameter, and so I'm going to call the parameter result. I'm going to take the function word out. Now, if I called it result here, my line inside my function, because remember, this is like a one-line function, right? But I don't need the parentheses. I don't need the brackets if it's just one line. Now, result's a big object. I'm really after the rows that are in the result. I'm just familiar with the result object that's in the PG library. So that's how I know how to grab the array of data out of the result object and type it out. Now, this could blow up. I could give a bad password, bad username, or I could select on a table that doesn't exist. So I had to go then, not then, catch. Catch deals with the errors. So what if there was an error? Well, then take that, my function will take that error and then pass it to my one line that's inside it, console.log this time. Now, error is a bigger object. I know it has a property called message. Probably the message is enough to say what happened. There's one more thing I have to do. Regardless if I connect and I connect and query, regardless of whether there's a result or an error, I have to give the client back or tell the client to kind of disconnect from the database. Otherwise, it's going to remain open, and the next time through it'll make another one. And eventually, if I ran this enough, I would run the server out of sessions in that. So again, then needs an asynchronous function to call. It's going to be a one-liner where it just goes client dot end. Make sure you light that firecracker. Done. And semicolon. That ends the line. So from line 18 to 23, that's really just one long line, but it makes it easier to read when we just break it. I like to break it on the dot, right? So client, try to connect. If that works, then try to query. If that works, process a result. If then something it didn't work, print the error. And by the way, don't forget to release the client. Okay, and that. So is that enough to test? Well, probably too much. Probably going to get an error. So CLS to clear the screen. Node main.java. Okay. We get the prompt. Thinking about it. Okay. So my demo username is the same as the database. Video demo. Maybe I should call it video database and video user. Who knows? Later. Top secret password. So that worked. The echo worked. I'm happy with that. Boom. Oh, and the table came out too. Well, I didn't have any errors. That's odd. That's okay. I'll take it today. And that. So, and a big thing is this prompt came back. It may be a subtle thing. If this prompt it doesn't come back, you seem to be at the bottom of the table and not, the cursor blinking, kind of like the console's hung up. Then something happened that we didn't get a clean end. Classic thing is you do this, you forget to put the parentheses on, like the firecracker, or you forget to send then an asynchronous function and it does it synchronously, and you're actually stuck over in the end function and it didn't actually come back. Okay. So just remember, when you do a then promise, always do the parentheses arrow to send it a function. And then if it's just one line, you don't need the braces. But it is possible to have multiple lines in here, just so you know. So I think that's about all I wanted to show you, is just how now we can put these techniques that we saw using the prompt, and now we can actually, and using other libraries, build up to actually, logging into a database and pulling data out of it and actually processing it on our side. So thanks for stopping by. This is probably the last step in the series. Try to catch you on another one. Bye for now.